All right. Hi, everyone. Hari and I are going to introduce ourselves in a second, but we're already failing because we're sitting on the wrong side from what we were told. But this is how we felt more comfortable. It's really nice to see all of you. I hope that you are enjoying Talent Connect so far. My name's Emily Pogue. I lead marketing for our Talent Solutions business. Do you want me to introduce you, or can you do that?
Do
that yourself?
On the product team for our
Got it.
Talent
Hari has
Solutions
it. I hope you guys enjoyed the keynotes this morning. I thought Jose Andres, super inspirational. Great to hear from Ryan. We're going to take things a little bit down an altitude in this session. So the goal here is really for us to walk you through our learning product strategy, what we're thinking about, what the vision is, and how that ties to what we've been hearing from all of you, not only in this conference, but in general over the past few quarters and years. So we're going to start with a little bit of conversation before we go into some slides on the roadmap. One of the themes we've been talking about a lot here, and that I know has been prevalent for many of you in your organizations, is this idea that we can't continue to think about people purely as the sum of their experience and where they went to school. Certainly we need to consider their skills, but we also need to consider things like their preferences for how they want to work and how they're going to be most productive. And in addition, their values. How does that align with an organization that they may want to work for? So we're going to start on our side in that spirit of understanding more about people with something just a little personal about ourselves. And then we'll go into some of the things that we're hearing from customers. So you may be wondering, and it's probably really big behind me, why there is a cruise ship and a kind of terrifying / funny monster on the screen behind us. So I'm going to start. I don't know if I guess, again, I'm on the wrong side. So the image that belongs to me is the cruise ship. For anyone who knows me well, there is no image that probably is less appropriate or less representative of myself. I get super seasick. I'm pretty environmental. My husband teaches climate change, and I don't know that the cruise industry is always associated with environmentalism. And then I'm an introvert, so I don't really like crowds. That said, I did join the board of an organization called Semester at Sea. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, a few people. So I didn't have any affiliation with Semester at Sea. I was approached by a colleague, and I thought at first, I haven't really heard much about this program. I'm not sure if it's for me. But as I started thinking about it, I realized that this board was an opportunity to learn about a ton of things that I don't get to learn about in my day job. So it covered everything. And if you're not familiar with Semester at Sea, it's a study abroad program. It's a nonprofit where students take a semester. They get college credit traveling the world on a ship. They visit a bunch of different countries. And the goal is to develop people who have a global mindset, global perspective, get introduced to cultures, develop a sense of empathy, so that after college, we have more leaders and more people entering the workforce who are really bringing that global perspective. And as I thought about what I could learn, I realized it was an opportunity for me to understand academia, which I didn't have a lot of experience with, and students as an audience that I don't spend a ton of time on. I've learned about maritime law, which was something very new, supply chain management, in addition to understanding global cultures and global studies. And so it's been a really amazing experience for me to take some things that actually have come to serve me really well in my current job, just giving me different perspectives about how a different organization operates and some of the things that they have to consider. So that's something that I've been doing outside of work, what's been a great experience just in terms of learning. So I will turn it to Hari to talk about the monster.
Well, first, what's awesome, they have some notes here, and mine says, talk about monster, which I think is truly, truly insightful. The reason there's a monster here in my learning journey, we thought it would be a fun way to start. A couple years, I used to tell my kids these bedtime stories about more everyday monsters you face, right? Not the ones that hide under your bed and come out and crawl, but monsters like ego or concentration. And during COVID, we said, we found some monsters, we've kind of put a book together. And of course, I had no idea how to write a book. I mean, I could barely, this is mostly done in service of getting him to go to bed. But we figured it out with a little bit of LinkedIn Learning's help and all this publishing and a few other kind of sources. We were able to put a book together, and it's we actually just crossed 500,000 readers. So I'm very proud of little Santiago for that one as we go through.
Great. So we'll turn back to work. I was looking out in the audience. I was telling Hari before we did this session when I heard we were going to be in a movie theater. I was kind of making a joke about, oh, I hope they're serving popcorn. And then I'm on the marketing team, so my team has been responsible for putting together this event. And I was talking to someone on my team, and they said, oh, no, there really is going to be popcorn and soda, like open concessions. So I hope that everyone is enjoying that, because I feel like no matter how engaging or unengaging we may be, it's better if you have popcorn and Sour Patch Kids. Oops. Oops. Sorry. So I want to turn it a little bit to what we've been actually learning on the work front. So both Hari and I have been on the learning business at LinkedIn for about 5 years. And part of our job is to understand what is going on in the L&D space with our customers, what is top of mind, what are the problems that we can help solve with the products that we develop. And so we have the chance to talk to customers on a regular basis at events like this and through other forums. And I thought we'd just share a little bit about some of the things that we've learned and that we've heard, some of which has been reinforced in conversations over the past couple days. So I'll start with one of the things that I've really observed is how much things have changed for L&D leaders in the past 5 years. So when I started on the business, shortly after we acquired lynda.com, and I was coming up to speed on the space and the world of L&D, what I heard most frequently was people were trying to encourage their organizations to care about learning, to embrace a culture of learning, trying to get budget, focused on saying, you know, this really is important, it's the key to retention, but a lot of organizations just weren't there yet. There was still a lot of tops-down learning, compliance, not a ton of buy-in on the idea of employees really driving their own learning journey, and it as a way for people to feel invested in and a chance to grow outside of learning that they maybe did once, you know, as part of higher education or previous schooling. Fast forward to today, I think the conversation is really different. We have data to prove it. We've seen L&D budgets grow. Certainly over what we've experienced in the past couple years. Conversations about career development, retention, the need to invest in people reskilling or upskilling have made it to C-suite level conversations. CEOs care about it. Ryan talked about it a bit today, how much time he's spending with Twila and the other leaders in our L&D and TA function at LinkedIn. And you know, the other thing that's really changed is the amount of time that TA and L&D are spending together, having to tackle issues that require both sides of the house to collaborate so that talent isn't just coming into the organization and leaving, but we're bringing talent into organizations who are a fit with that organization's values, it works for how they want to work, and they see the organization as an opportunity not just for their current role, but for roles in the future. So that's one thing that I've definitely observed. Hari, I know you've had a bunch of conversations, been doing some roundtables. It'd be great if you could touch on some of the things you're hearing or have heard over the past few quarters.
I guess the biggest thing I've learned in the last couple of days is this need for, I'll call it skills visibility, or maybe internal skills visibility. And I think here's the trend, because I've heard it between hiring and L&D, and here's kind of the trend I've been seeing, is it's still really, really hard to hire, especially in many, many pockets. It's getting more expensive in many pockets to hire. So people are starting to say, okay, let's expand. Let's expand, you know, maybe we don't need this person, maybe there's other kind of skills we can do there. And then pretty quickly it becomes, well, maybe we have someone internally who could do that as well. But now, if you kind of think about that process, the bottleneck is, well, who's internal, right? If you grow big enough, it's hard to just write on the whiteboard all the people who could do the job. How do you actually find that? And that need now of, okay, how are we going to figure this out? How is this going to work? It feels much more acute than I've felt, at least in the last couple of years I've been here.
Yeah. It's interesting, too. One of the things that I've observed through conversations is that we're starting to make this real distinction between the idea of internal mobility and skills or organizational agility, where I think sometimes internal mobility can feel sort of daunting, or it's this idea that you're going to go from one role to a completely different one. We're seeing much more, and what I'm hearing a lot more conversation about is this idea, again, of agility, of it's not necessarily about completely transforming, you know, to something that's an entirely new function, But in industries where skills, needs are changing fairly rapidly, or companies where people or the organization is feeling a bit more budget constrained in terms of ability to hire, there's often the opportunity for top performers who maybe have amazing soft skills that are transferable to learn a skill that helps them move to a role that's really aligned against one of the top business priorities. And this, again, I think what we're hearing over and over again is the ability to create that kind of culture, that kind of agility requires partnership between the TA and L&D organization in order to be successful. So that's another thing that I've been hearing a bit about. So I think with that, I'll turn it back to Hari to go into some of the specifics around what we're building on the roadmap.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump into, now that I'm done talking about Monster, I can switch the slide, and I want to just go through a little bit of the roadmap. Here's the way I suggest we do this. We're going to go through 3 parts, and I'll explain a little bit why I think how we see the ecosystem, and then we're just going to 3 parts. We're going to talk a little bit about content. We're going to talk about career development, and then we're going to talk about integrations and how it fits into everyday tools, which I know is also something I just came up with a lot of customers we went through. So I'll do it with a couple stories maybe to start. I want to just go back to 2 years ago. We had an interesting item that happened in our content. We've always said, our content at the core of the job. We have instructors and we have learners, and we have to find the best instructors and get any piece of friction out of them so they can reach as many learners as possible. COVID hits, and we have 2 issues. One, as many of you know, we find incredible topics. We find the best expert using our network for the topics. We have them come into the production studio. We do everything from, everything we can do with them. The studio is closed, right, because we couldn't film. You can't do things like makeup artists. You can't have people come in. So we're sitting here being, how are we going to actually make content? And then the world starts changing super fast, right? So the demand for things that, everything from DI to work from home to all of a sudden, teams, like how are we going to start creating these things to come through? And I look back on this over a couple years, and I think it actually made us much more efficient. We're able to react way faster to trends that are happening because we've created brand new tools and processes that are able to help us go. Everything we just did a course a couple weeks ago was done in a day. Right? And it was high quality, always LinkedIn Learning. We never lose sight of that quality. But it was this ability to say, OK, we can license here. We can actually do this course remote. We can do this. Those capabilities started to come through. And that created this energy on this team where we started thinking about quality content. We started saying, OK, now we kind of have a storyboard of, hey, we know when we have an issue that happens in the market, how can we get there as fast as humanly possible? Let's make sure we're number 1 there. To how do we start removing friction in other parts of it? And that's created just hundreds of different things we're doing now in order to make sure that our content takes that instructor and make sure it reaches the learner as perfectly as possible. So I thought maybe I'd just start with doing 3 of them here, and then we'll go on to the next pillar. The first thing I want to talk about is tech. Now, up to about 40% of our English library now is being filled in terms of tech. We know there's a massive need for this. Again, we look at the trends in the data. We try to figure out we know the tech is coming through. But there is a real challenge, which is if you're taking a tech course, you probably want a practice environment to come through. So we went and said, this idea of removing friction, we were lucky to have a partner in GitHub across Microsoft, and we said, look, let's just go start getting these GitHub exercise files. And now we've created these code spaces for a lot of our courses that lets people have really high practice. And it's cool, because obviously we have a team of a lot of software engineers, including Erica, who leads our engineering team. And it's cool to see how people internally are starting to use this as well. It feels like a really nice way to start removing friction in how tech is learned. Nano tips. Sounds obvious. Everyone has different styles by which they learn. And usually if you ask someone to write down those styles, you probably think audio, video, visual. I'm telling you, there's a new generation who's learning on this kind of a visual video, right? It has to be fast, has to be vertical, has to have subtitles. It's just the way the information is processed. We're doing hundreds of these now. And we're actually finding it has 2x overall views. Again, removing friction, right, for that audience. 2x overall views. But when you look at Gen Z, it's got way higher than even that. This is just a category that seems to be taking off, and our ability to make sure that we have the instructors and then help them have the learning here. This just seems to be another way we're trying to remove friction in this content as we reanimate it. And the last one is languages. We've heard from so many people that even if you have a library, the world is more global, and certainly the world is more hybrid and remote. You got to make sure that some of that content can actually be understood by different folks in different places. And so we started doing a lot of different language capabilities. We obviously have our capabilities that make sure we can do stuff in the local language where necessary, but we started doing a lot with machine learning. And again, in this idea of removing friction, I was super skeptical. I'm just going to own it. I was super skeptical of the team. I said, prove it. Like, I want to see the course. I don't speak Italian, but like, I'll figure it out. But like, I want to figure out if this is going to work. And I'm really proud of where we landed. I think this technology is really getting to the point where there is something here now where even teaching, which in my opinion is one of the hardest forms of communication, right? How do you get that instructional design done through the right language? I'm feeling really good about this. So it's fun to see our languages expand. But Emily, that was the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I think in many ways kind of the core thing that we work through. But another thing that happened, another story I'll go back to, is we started just seeing these ideas of the great reshuffle, and we started hearing from more and more people that, look, the problem you solve around reskilling is interesting, but there's another problem we really need to get after, which is how do you actually help someone build a career? It's different, right? They're different things. You can have someone who needs to understand how to use a tool like Zoom. You can have someone who needs to understand how to have a managerial practice, and you can get them into the product, and you can make sure it's there. And forever, that was what we called the problem to solve at LinkedIn, right? Their job to be done. We said, let's go make sure someone has the right skills. We started thinking about this a little bit further. We started saying, hey, what if we could actually help someone build a career? What if that was the core problem we could come solve? And I thought what I'd do is just walk you through the process of how we started attacking the problem, and you can see a little bit of the features that came across the way, because it's been a fun journey. And maybe there's some products here that I hopefully will have help. So the very first thing I did is I said, okay, where is the breakdown? The number one reason people say they leave a company is because they don't feel they actually have a career goal. They don't feel anyone cares. They don't feel they can build a career there. And so I said, where's the breakdown? If you have a career goal, why is it not being filled? So I went and I asked the HR team, hey, just send me a list of our career goals. Guess what? As crazy as this is, as talent forward as people are, there was no way that people actually collected these career goals. There's no one who said, hey, what do you actually want to be? There's no one there. And I asked a bunch of friends. I asked a bunch of people, probably a lot of people in this room. And there was just no consistent way of doing it. So we did this really radical thing where we just put in a little button, and we said, hey, why don't you tell us your career goal? And it's actually been pretty interesting. You can all do this, and maybe you can yell it out. But I'd just be curious how many people think that changing career paths, what would be your guess of the number of people who would actually come in and say, actually, I love this company, I just want a different role? 70. Wow. You're more optimistic than me. It was about 30 to 40% of people coming in and saying, this is what I've been. The majority of people still want to say, I want to advance in my career, right? I want to go and I want to be better. Maybe, and actually, there's probably a lot of new employees over the last couple of years too, so they're probably there. But it's impressive to me to see how many people were coming in and actually saying this. But here's the other second thing we learned from a lot of people we put this in front of. That they didn't actually know what some of these functions even were, right? There was this real understanding of I kind of see this person, they seem interesting, but I'm not sure what it is. So we started making these role guides. Of course, they're going to be fully customizable, because I recognize that a function in one place is not a function somewhere else. But it's this idea of how do you start understanding what a role actually is? How do you start saying this is what a sales manager is? How do you start seeing the community, the groups in there? How do you start seeing the skills required to do it? How do you start seeing the content? And it was that idea of how do you just help someone now who may feel like I don't have a career goal get that goal. So that was step 2. We started getting more and more people in our pilots to add this. We were starting to see people add intent. And then there was a question of well, I know pieces of this, of course. It's not like I'm going to move from here to here and I need to learn hundreds of different things. So how do I actually understand where my skills ramp to what I need to be? How do I actually know if I wanted to move from product marketing to product management? How do I actually know what the gap is? So we started building these skills evaluations. These are the capability to come in and say what we call precepts. It's just, you could come in and you could actually say, okay, where are my gaps? Where are my gaps and what I have to do? And it could put together a plan that you needed to go through. Start to see people taking these learning courses. There's a problem. Who's actually going to know that you took these learning courses? So on this one, we actually bought a company. We got a company called EduBrite. It was the best Q&A company we could see. In the sense, it was the best place to actually do assessments here. And so therefore, we started saying, let's get deeper and deeper into professional assessments. It doesn't make sense that you have to prove this skill by going and taking a proctored exam. And of course, there's people who can prove the skill by other means. If you go to our product today, you can say, oh, I worked in this experience here. But for people who really wanted to pivot and had to prove a way to skill, we wanted to make sure we put in these professional certs. And finally, we just closed the loop. And we needed this for the value prop, right? We needed to be able to tell people that there's jobs here. This is what you're working towards. Now you're visible. And now when you come in and you can do these things, recruiters can find you. So you have the internal spotlights that we're talking through. And you can start seeing the jobs coming through. And of course, because this is already done with a lot of the LinkedIn work, there was no integration. It would just kind of happen as we go through. And I know there's a lot of work to do here. I don't want to overpromise this. I recognize a lot of companies have different internal job processes. But it's very cool when you come into a product, and I've had a chance to see a lot of learners come through, when you can see this and say, oh, I get it. I get that there's actual jobs here in this field. I get why I'm putting in my intent. I get how these things flip together. Now you have a real solution where you can actually see how your career, and if you invest in this, start coming through. And that was a big part of our career development journey. Okay, I want to go to the next one here. The third part of the roadmap I want to talk through was just how do we actually integrate? How do we build these things in everyday tools? You know, the last time we all met live was 2019. And honestly, a lot of the conversations I had were really different. The conversations were around different kinds of platforms people wanted to get, different kind of things that they wanted to start looking through. Now it feels like a lot of the conversations, how do I simplify my platforms? How do I go through? And I think in many ways our product has gone through that as well. You can, of course, come to LinkedIn. Tons of people do, and they add custom content. They make their own learning paths. They integrate. But there is a reality that a lot of the learning environments have gotten fairly complex. And so we want to make sure that our learning is wherever you want our learning to be. And so we've done a lot more work in terms of integrations, everything from Viva to many of the people on the slide and many of the great partners we get to work with. And a lot of that work we recognize is no matter what happens, one thing we learned in the hybrid world is you're not going to be able to control where those learners are going to. All you can do is just be there when their time is right. And a lot of the work we're doing is in order to put these things through. But the last thing I'll end on is wherever those learning is coming through, we wanted to spend time actually making sure that we had the reporting right. We started to really dream about what is the dashboard of the future, right? What is the dashboard that we're all going to look at to say, like, are we actually helping people build their careers? Are we helping them get their skills? Are we making sure that these things work through? And that is kind of the big area we want to do. As we integrate through, we want to make sure that data still makes sure they go to that dashboard and that we have that dashboard of the future as we move on through. And we're pretty excited about this. We really think this is the one that ultimately will show a lot of the ways to make sure that people are building their careers and actually learning the skills they need. So with that, Emily, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. So we wanted to make sure we left a little bit of time for a couple things. One, we have some extra time, so Hari and I are going to be up here after. If you have any questions, feedback, thoughts, ideas that you want to share, we'd love to chat. We'd love to meet you, so feel free to please come up. And then we also have an actual survey. I have been told that despite the fact that there is an enormous QR code on the screen, you should not use it. That you will actually get a notification in your Talent Connect app with a chance to give feedback. Please give feedback on the session. We also would love feedback on the roadmap, needs that we haven't captured, if things we said resonated or didn't resonate. So would really appreciate you taking the time to do that. The thing that I wanted to end with, Hari gave a lot of an amazing detail. I'm in marketing, so my job is to take everything that he said and try to distill it down to like 1 or 2 words. And I think one of the things we talk about a lot about everything that Hari covered is really relevance. And this idea that there are tons of different types of employees, tons of different types of organizations. Everyone has different career goals. They have different ways of learning, different needs. They're at different points in their career. And we have this really unique asset in our 850 million member base who are interacting every day and creating all of these data points. And learning is something that we know is competing with lots of other things that you have to get done at work, maybe urgent deadlines you have, things that are happening or more entertaining, potentially TV in your personal life. And so we really feel the responsibility to say, if we're going to help people learn and grow, we've got to figure out how to make sure we're relevant in every dimension. So we're timely. We're serving up the right format. It's the right course topic for what you're trying to do with your career. And our ability to use the data that we have to get better and better at that is really what we're focused on with this roadmap. And what is exciting about if we can get that right, ensure that every person is feeling like things that come their way are things that they're excited to learn and feel like will help them in their career journey. So thank you so much to everyone in this room for sharing your feedback, sharing your perspective, giving us the opportunity to work in the talent space. Like I said, we've been on the learning side for 5 years. We're now both focused on hiring as well, but I think have a soft spot for learning, and it's been a really fun journey to see how things have evolved since the days of lynda.com to the world today, where we're thinking about learning and hiring very holistically and as a continuum. So thank you to all of you. I look forward to meeting some of you after this session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.